The Pacific Northwest had a way of making the rest of the world feel like it didn't exist. On a Tuesday morning in late May, Hargrove Heights wore that quality like a tailored coat. The air smelled of wet cedar, something floral that no one had planted themselves, and underneath it all, drifting from the open door of the boutique coffee shop on the corner of Bellwood Avenue, the warm, dark perfume of freshly ground Ethiopian pour-over. The sidewalks were so clean you could eat off them. Every lawn looked like it had been measured with a ruler before the mower came through. The gap between the curb and the nearest piece of litter was not measured in feet, it was measured in philosophy. This was a town that had decided collectively, and without ever holding a meeting about it, that certain kinds of mess simply did not belong here. The streets were lined with mature Douglas firs that filtered the morning light into long golden columns. The cars parked along Bellwood Avenue didn't make noise when you closed the door, luxury SUVs in muted colors, a few European sedans, a hybrid that cost more than most people's annual salary sitting at the curb like it was meditating. People moved through the morning with the ease of the financially comfortable. A woman in yoga clothes walked a golden retriever wearing a monogrammed bandana. Neither of them was in any hurry, because hurrying was something that happened to other people in other zip codes. Hargrove Heights had perfected the art of looking clean while hiding rot underneath, the way a beautiful piece of fruit can be turning from the inside without showing a single mark on the skin. If you had the right kind of eyes, the kind shaped by 30 years of watching how institutions behave when they think no one important is watching, you could feel that rot in the quality of the silence, in the way certain people were watched as they walked down the street, in the unspoken arithmetic of belonging that ran beneath every pleasantry exchanged between neighbors on these beautiful cedar-scented mornings. But for right now, the morning was just a morning. A nondescript dark green rental sedan pulled quietly into a 2-hour parking spot in front of the boutique coffee shop. It parked with unhurried precision. The driver had no agenda beyond exactly this: a cup of coffee, a few documents to review, and the particular piece of sitting still before the day began asking things of him. The man inside wore a faded navy zip-up hoodie. Reading glasses sat low on the bridge of his nose. His left hand held a small paper cup of Ethiopian pour-over. His right thumb scrolled through a tablet in the slow, methodical way of someone who reads because the habit has been with him so long it's become indistinguishable from breathing. He was entirely at peace with the world around him. In a few minutes, that was going to cost him something. Officer Dale Croft had been sitting at the end of Bellwood Avenue since 6:45 in the morning. His shift didn't officially start until 7:30. He would have called the extra 45 minutes dedication. His department would have called it discretionary community presence, which was the kind of language that made illegal habits sound like institutional virtues. Cruiser 7 was parked in the shadow of a Douglas fir at the far end of the block, angled just enough toward Bellwood Avenue that Dale could see the entire stretch of storefronts without being immediately visible from them. He had been sitting in that exact position for so long that the coffee in his travel mug had gone from scalding to lukewarm to something he was drinking purely out of habit. 14 years on the Hargrove Heights Police Department had given Dale Croft a particular kind of confidence. The kind that comes not from being proven right again and again, but from never being seriously challenged, which is a very different thing, and produces a very different kind of man. The kind who mistakes the absence of consequence for the presence of correctness. Who confuses the fact that nobody stopped him with the proof that he was doing the right thing. He was broad across the shoulders, buzz cut kept tight enough that you could see the shape of his skull underneath. His jaw sat slightly clenched, even when he wasn't angry. The muscles there had been held in low-grade tension for so long that fully relaxing them was no longer something his body remembered how to do. His eyes, a flat, pale blue, were always moving, always cataloging, always running the people and vehicles around him through an internal filter calibrated not by training, but by 14 years of being rewarded for the wrong things. Because that was the thing about Dale Croft that a personnel file never captured. He was not a stupid man. He was not someone who woke up in the morning with the conscious intention of doing harm, which made him in many ways more dangerous than someone who did. Men who know they are doing wrong can sometimes be reasoned with, can sometimes be shown a mirror. But men who have convinced themselves that their prejudice is actually instinct, that their bias is actually training, that their cruelty is the firm and necessary hand of authority, those men are almost impossible to reach. Every promotion Dale had ever received came in the wake of a high arrest period. Every high arrest period was built on stops that were called discretionary. Stops that were in practice a map of who Dale had decided didn't belong in which parts of town. The department looked at those numbers and put a plaque on the wall. Dale looked at the plaque and understood the message without anyone saying it out loud. This is what we want. Keep doing it. You are an asset. He called it instinct, this internal alarm that fired when the visual arithmetic of a neighborhood didn't add up to his expectations. He would have been genuinely offended if you called it something else. In his mind, instinct was earned. Instinct was professional. Instinct was the distillation of experience into something faster and sharper than conscious thought. The fact that his instinct had a pattern that it triggered in direct proportion to the race of the person he was observing, rather than anything that person was actually doing, was something Dale had never once sat still long enough to examine. In the passenger seat of Cruiser 7 sat Officer Ryan Malone, 24 years old, 3 months out of the academy, already accumulating a private mental ledger of moments when the job looked nothing like what they had described in training. A ledger he had not yet decided what to do with. Ryan was a lean kid with an earnest face and careful, watchful eyes. The kind of eyes that come from growing up paying close attention to the adults around you. His mother had been a county public defender for 20 years. She had raised him on the principle that a badge was a promise made to every person in a community, not a prize awarded to a select few. He had believed her, completely and genuinely, which was why 3 months of riding with Dale Croft had produced in him a low, persistent anxiety that he couldn't quite bring himself to name yet. The way you can feel a headache coming before you can actually call it a headache. Ryan was staring at the passing storefronts, composing in his head the kind of quiet observation that would let the rest of the shift pass without incident when Dale's voice cut through the cruiser's silence with the sharp, proprietary excitement of a man who has been waiting all morning to find something. Look at this. He said it the way you say something when the conclusion has already been reached, when the observation is just narration of a decision made. He slowed Cruiser 7 to a crawl. Ryan leaned forward. A dark green rental sedan parked legally in a 2-hour spot in front of the coffee shop. Inside, sitting with the window partway down, was a black man in his early 50s in a navy hoodie, holding a paper cup, reading a tablet, doing absolutely nothing that in any other context would have warranted a second look from anyone. Out-of-state plates, Dale said, his voice dropping into the low, slow, predatory frequency Ryan had learned to recognize over 3 months. Virginia. Sitting there for God knows how long, casing the joint probably. Doesn't belong in this zip code. Ryan watched the man scroll his tablet with the unhurried focus of someone who is genuinely reading something. Watched him lift the coffee cup and take a slow sip. The comfortable slowness of a person with nowhere urgently to be. Brad, he's just drinking coffee. The shop just opened. Maybe he drove up from Portland and stopped to rest. You're naive, Harrison. Dale said it without heat, with the patient condescension of a man delivering a lesson he has delivered many times before. Then he turned the wheel, pulled Cruiser 7 directly behind the dark green rental, and hit the light switch. The red and blue strobes shattered the peaceful morning ambience like a rock through glass. People who look like that, Dale said, opening his door in a neighborhood where houses go for $3 million, they're up to something. Let's go see what our friend is hiding. Ryan climbed out of the car because that was what he did. Because the alternative required a kind of courage he hadn't yet figured out how to find. Marcus Weston was 54 years old and had the kind of stillness about him that people sometimes mistook for passivity, the way they mistake a deep river for a slow one. He was broadly built, had been an athlete in college, maintained that fitness through 36 years of federal standards and the kind of discipline that becomes indistinguishable from personality after long enough. His face had learned over decades to be unreadable while remaining fully engaged, a skill never explicitly taught anywhere, but one that becomes necessary when you are a black man who has spent 3 decades in rooms where being readable at the wrong moment costs you something. As the deputy director of the FBI's National Security Branch, Marcus Weston oversaw 3,400 federal agents across 6 operational divisions. He coordinated intelligence sharing with 14 partner agencies. In the past fiscal year alone, he had briefed the President of the United States on 11 separate occasions about threats that most Americans would never know existed. He was in Hargrove Heights because his niece Aaliyah was graduating from high school today, his sister Denise's daughter, the first in 3 generations of their family to earn a full academic scholarship to a university. Aaliyah had asked him specifically with the emphasis that 18-year-olds deploy when they really mean something, whether Uncle Marcus would be in the front row. He had told her yes, without hesitation, because some promises are made from a place that has nothing to do with schedules and everything to do with love. He had arrived the evening before, found himself awake at 5:30 the way a body trained to be alert at all hours stays alert even when it has been told to rest. Rather than lie cataloging the acoustic properties of the hotel's HVAC system, he had dressed navy hoodie, dark jeans, the reading glasses, and driven out into the morning in search of good coffee and the specific undervalued pleasure of sitting still in a quiet place with something interesting to read. The tablet on the passenger seat held a folder of unclassified briefing summaries. Habit, not urgency. The kind of reading that felt like a day off. He was 3 pages in when the flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror, and Marcus Weston felt the feeling he recognized immediately. Not fear, not surprise. Something more like the heavy, exhausting, bone-deep recognition of a man who knows exactly what is happening before it happens, who has lived in a body that makes him a target in certain contexts his entire life, and who has developed a protocol for these moments that is part discipline and part grief. He was not afraid of the man walking toward his window. He was tired of him, in the specific, profound way that you are tired of something you have been encountering your entire life in 100 different forms, 100 different faces, 100 different encounters that all share the same essential geometry. Marcus set his coffee in the cup holder, pressed the power button on the tablet, slid it onto the passenger seat. He didn't reach into his pockets, didn't make any sudden movements, just rested both hands on the top of the steering wheel, palms down, fingers open. Then, with the same internal motion that 36 years of federal service had built into something as natural as breathing, he made a decision. The credentials were in his inner breast pocket, the heavy black bifold with the gold eagle, the card with his clearance level, the badge that would end this in approximately 4 seconds if he produced it at the window. He did not produce it. He thought about every man in Hargrove Heights who had been pulled over on a road like this one, and who had nothing in his breast pocket except his heart beating too fast. He thought about what happened to those men after the stop. The charges filed, the records marked, the futures bent at angles they could never quite straighten out. If he flashed the badge now, Dale would fold, apologize, and be back on these streets in 3 weeks. And the machine would keep running exactly as it had been running. Quietly. Efficiently. Eating the futures of the people who lived here and didn't have a gold badge to hide behind. Marcus kept his hands on the wheel and waited. Not with resignation. with the cold patience of a man who has decided to be the evidence. The first thing Dale Croft said when he reached the driver's window was not "good morning." It was "license, registration, and proof of insurance right now," delivered with the flat energy of a man who has already reached his conclusion and is simply processing paperwork. He leaned into the window as he said it, used his physical bulk the way he always did. A punctuation mark, an exclamation point made of muscle and badge. The smell of stale coffee and cheap deodorant came in through the open window with him. Marcus noticed, registered it, did not react to any of it. "Good morning, officer." His voice was deep, measured, unhurried, entirely devoid of the scrambling, appeasing register that Dale was used to hearing in this situation. The absence of it landed on Dale immediately. "Is there a problem? Was I parked illegally?" I asked the questions. The irritation was already there. The man hadn't fumbled for his wallet, hadn't said "yes, sir," hadn't adopted the posture of cooperative deference that Dale's presence was designed to produce. "License and registration. Now." "I'm perfectly willing to provide my identification," Marcus said. Patient, precise, the words of a man who has had to know these words by heart his entire life. "But as I'm parked legally engine off, I'm simply asking for the reasonable and articulable suspicion for this detainment. Are you investigating a specific crime?" On the passenger side, Ryan Malone had walked around the front of the car and was standing at the passenger window. He looked at the man inside, then looked across the roof at Dale. The man was not nervous, not evasive, not criminal. Ryan leaned toward Dale. Quiet. "He's clean, Brad. Let's run the plates and go." "Shut it, Malone." The tone meant the conversation was over before it began. Ryan went quiet. He took out his notebook. He began to write. Not Dale's version of the morning. The actual version. "You want suspicion?" Dale leaned closer. His voice dropped into the register he reserved for moments like this, the low, slow menace of a man who has never had to justify himself. "There's been a rash of burglaries in this area. You fit the description. That's your suspicion. License. Now." It was a lie so casual it barely registered on Dale's face as one. Ryan wrote the word "fabricated" in his notebook and underlined it. There had been no burglaries in Hargrove Heights in 4 months. Marcus knew. He filed it, the way he filed everything as data, as evidence, as a brick in the structure being built. He reached slowly into the center console announcing the movement before making it, produced the rental agreement, then reached into his back pocket with equal care and produced his Virginia driver's license. Both hands visible. Both items placed in Dale's hand with the deliberate, documented calm of a man creating a record. Dale read the name. Said Marcus Weston, with the slight flattening of the first syllable that told Marcus he had been called Mark by this man before he'd been called anything at all. Then said, "Long way from home, Marcus. What are you doing in Hargrove Heights?" "Visiting family," Marcus said. "My niece graduates today." A pause. "And it's Mr. Weston?" The temperature around Dale's collar went up several degrees. He looked at the license, looked at the man. The interaction had not produced submission, and in Dale's playbook the only move left when submission wasn't given freely was escalation. "Step out of the vehicle." Ryan moved to the driver's side, kept his voice low. "Brad, we've got the ID, he's clean, we should write it up and let him go." Dale gave him the look that meant not another word, and Ryan went back to his notebook and hated himself a little for it, and wrote another line. "Officer," Marcus said. His voice had dropped half a register, not louder, heavier. "You have my identification. You have my rental agreement. I am not a flight risk, and I am not a threat. Ordering me out of the car escalates a situation that requires no escalation. I am asking you one more time, what specific crime do you suspect me of committing?" The flush reached Dale's face in one hot wave. He stepped back, unsnapped the retention strap on his holster. Slowly, deliberately. The threat was explicit. Marcus looked at the hand hovering near the weapon, ran the variables, and arrived at the only conclusion that protected everyone in this moment: comply now. Then bring the full weight of the United States government down on this man's world like a building falling. "All right," Marcus said quietly, as if agreeing to something minor. "I am stepping out of the vehicle." He opened the door. Both feet on the pavement, stood to his full 6 feet 3 inches. Dale registered the size of him for the first time. The full presence, broad across the chest, the natural unperformed authority of someone whose body has been a professional instrument for decades. Dale felt something he couldn't name, the specific uncomfortable sensation of having miscalculated the scale of the thing in front of him. He compensated the only way he knew how. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder with both hands and spun him hard, slamming him face first against the side of the rental car. "Hands on the roof! Spread your legs!" Marcus's jaw hit the cold metal. A brief, bright pain. He absorbed it without a sound, spread his arms and legs, and spoke loudly, clearly calibrated to reach Ryan Malone's ears specifically. "Officer Malone, I am fully compliant, zero physical resistance. Your partner has just initiated a physical assault on a parked cooperative motorist without establishing probable cause. Shut your mouth." Dale's hands moved fast and rough down Marcus's legs across his waist to the outside of the hoodie. He found the civilian wallet in the back pocket, felt the general weight of something in the inner breast pocket under the hoodie, but his hands were moving too fast, running on adrenaline, on the performance of authority rather than the practice of it. He missed it completely. "Weapons anything sharp." Dale pressed his forearm against the back of Marcus's neck, harder than necessary. "No weapons," Marcus said, flat, documenting. "And you are currently applying excessive force." Dale pulled Marcus's arms behind his back. The cuffs went on with the specific petty cruelty of a man taking the only available form of victory in a confrontation that had not gone his way. Several notches tighter than necessary, tight enough to bite into the skin. Marcus registered the pain and filed it. Dale spun him around. "Disorderly conduct," he announced, voice recovered, now the list coming fast and confident. "Resisting arrest. Failure to comply. Failure to obey a lawful order." He looked at Marcus, waiting for the despair, waiting for the collapse. "You thought you could come into my town and act like you own the place. You're going to spend the next 48 hours in a concrete box, Mr. Weston. Let's see how smart you sound then." Marcus looked at him. No fear, no anger, nothing that could be called defeat. What was there instead, what Dale could not name and did not know how to read, was the cold, clinical expression of a man who has decided to let something happen. Because the consequences of letting it happen will be more thorough, more permanent, more complete than anything he could accomplish by stopping it right now. It was the look of a man who already knows how the story ends. "Officer Croft," Marcus said, reading the nameplate with unhurried precision. "I'm invoking my right to remain silent regarding your fabricated charges. But I'll say this once, if you put me in the back of that cruiser, you will cross a line your career will not come back from." Dale laughed. The laugh of a man who has heard threats his entire career and has never once suffered a consequence for ignoring them. "Threatening a police officer. Add that to the charges." He grabbed the back of Marcus's hoodie, marched him toward the cruiser, opened the rear door and shoved a sharp, sudden push that sent Marcus awkwardly into the hard plastic back seat, cuffed hands trapped beneath him. Slammed the door, turned to Ryan with the grin of a man who has just demonstrated something worth demonstrating. "See, rookie, that's how you handle these situations. You establish who the alpha is right from the start. They back down every time." Ryan looked through the wire mesh at the man in the back seat. Marcus had righted himself, sitting perfectly upright, cuffed hands behind his back, eyes fixed forward, not slumped, not furious, not defeated. Sitting with the absolute contained composure of a man running a calculation that had nothing to do with the inside of this cruiser. He didn't look like a man who had backed down. He looked like a man waiting for a timer to reach zero. The drive to the Hargrove Heights Police Department took 12 minutes. Dale filled every second of them. "You guys always think you're so smart," he said, catching Marcus's eyes in the rearview mirror and receiving nothing back, no reaction, no acknowledgement, no evidence that the words were landing anywhere at all, which was its own kind of provocation. Watch a couple YouTube videos about articulable suspicion this and probable cause that suddenly everybody's a constitutional lawyer. Out here on the street, the badge makes the rules. In my town, you don't talk back. Ryan was pressed against the passenger window, staring at the storefronts rolling past. He was not listening to Dale. He was counting every moment since Bellwood Avenue where he'd had the chance to stop what was happening, to say something real, to be the thing his mother had always told him a badge was supposed to be. He had stopped counting at 7. The number sat in his chest like a stone. Marcus was not staring out the window. He was cataloging. Badge number on the uniform shirt. Cruiser number on the center console. The indicator light on the dash cam mounted above the rearview mirror. The dash cam light was green. Recording. Dale had forgotten to shut it off. Marcus noted it the way he noted everything useful without expression, without reaction, with the quiet, practiced efficiency of a man who has spent 36 years turning small facts into large outcomes. Ryan saw the green light at almost the same moment. He had been about to say something. Then Dale had said, "Shut it, Malone," before the words formed, and Ryan had swallowed them back down and written another line in his notebook instead. The notebook was doing something now that Ryan hadn't planned. It wasn't just field notes anymore. It was becoming something else. Something he wasn't fully ready to name yet. As the cruiser turned into the precinct lot, Marcus spoke for the first time since Bellwood Avenue. One sentence. Addressed to no one in particular, in the same level documenting tone he had used at the window. "You should make sure your dash cam is running, Officer Malone." Ryan checked. The green light was steady. He said nothing. The color of his face did the speaking for him. He wrote one more line in the notebook and pressed the pen harder into the paper than he needed to, and Dale pulled Cruiser 7 into its numbered space and said, "Let's get him processed," and climbed out, and the 12 minutes of monologue were all recorded in high-definition audio, and Dale had no idea. The Hargrove Heights Police Department had been designed to communicate accountability without producing it. Exposed brick, clean glass, an open floor plan that suggested transparency, while the actual operations of the place happened behind closed doors and closed eyes. The booking desk sat at the center of it, elevated just enough that whoever sat behind it could look down at whoever stood in front of it. A small architectural choice that said everything about how the building thought about power. Sergeant Lou Briggs had been sitting behind that desk for 11 years. He was 58 years old and had developed over that time the specific, cultivated blankness of a man who has learned that selective blindness is the most efficient strategy in an environment where what you see either requires action or requires an explanation for why you didn't act. Acting was paperwork. Not acting was just Tuesday. So Lou Briggs had become over 11 years extremely accomplished at not quite seeing things he was directly looking at. He glanced up over his reading glasses when Dale came through the doors with a handcuffed black man in a navy hoodie. Assessed the tableau with the flat professional eye of someone who has processed 10,000 versions of this same scene. Pulled a blank booking sheet toward him. "Morning, Brad. What do we have?" "Got a live one, Sarge." Dale's chest inflated. His voice had the tone of a man displaying a prize. Marcus Weston. Found him casing businesses on Bellwood. Refused to provide ID initially. Got combative when I ordered him to exit the vehicle. Resisted a lawful detainment. Physically resisted the arrest. 2 officers at nearby desks had stopped typing. Ryan stood 3 feet to the left, staring at a specific scuff mark on the linoleum, and each sentence that came out of Dale's mouth was a sentence that diverged further from the morning Ryan had actually witnessed. Briggs wrote it down. Because writing it down was what Briggs did. And once it was written, the written version would become the official version. And the official version would follow Marcus Weston into whatever came next. Marcus let it happen for exactly 4 sentences. Then, in a voice calm enough and clear enough to carry across the entire booking room, he said, "Sergeant Briggs, I'm informing you that Officer Croft has just filed a false verbal report in your presence. I was seated legally in my vehicle. I provided my identification promptly upon request. I was ordered from the vehicle without probable cause, subjected to unnecessary physical force, handcuffed without legal basis for arrest, and transported to this building under implicit threat of deadly force. I am formally requesting that all dash cam footage from Officer Croft's cruiser be secured immediately before it is altered or deleted." The room went quiet. Not the quiet of no sound. The quiet of everyone having the same thought at the same time and no one yet knowing whether to say it out loud. The 2 desk officers were not typing. Lou Briggs looked at Marcus Weston and felt something shift in the category he had placed this man in. This was supposed to be a standard booking. A man in a hoodie moving through the machine. Instead, he had a man at his counter who was speaking with the precision of a deposition, who had named a specific provision, who was making eye contact with him, not Dale, who showed none of the markers, the fear, the anger, the grasping at dignity that Briggs associated with this side of the booking counter. This man sounds like a lawyer. Dale stepped forward, pointed a thick finger at Marcus's face. The performance was back the volume, the proximity, the aggressive theater of authority. "You shut your mouth. You are a suspect in my custody. You do not make demands at this counter." "Brad," Briggs said, quietly. A single word that carried 11 years of fatigue. "Calm down." He looked at Marcus. Procedure was the only shield he had. "Mr. Weston, you can make your case to the magistrate in the morning. Right now, I need you to empty your pockets." "Before we proceed," Marcus said, "I'd like to exercise my right to a phone call immediately." "You get a call after?" Dale started. "Actually," Briggs said, and the firmness in it was unexpected even to himself. "He can make one now. Go ahead, Mr. Weston. Use the wall phone." Marcus walked to the heavy metal phone mounted on the cinder block wall, the same measured stride he'd used walking to the cruiser, unhurried, deliberate. Dale leaned against the counter and watched him go, said to Ryan in a low, amused voice, "Probably calling his public defender, or his mama." Ryan was writing in his notebook. He made no response. He was writing something he would not erase. The wall phone smelled of all the different kinds of desperation that had been breathed into it over the years. Marcus picked it up and dialed a Washington, D.C. area code from memory. No hesitation. Not a single digit's pause. The way you dial a number you have called 10,000 times in 10,000 different situations. 2 rings. Morse. Sharp. Built for speed. "Calvin," Marcus said. And his voice shifted not dramatically, but in the subtle way it shifted when he stepped from one context into another that Calvin Morse knew immediately. Because in 11 years of working for Marcus Weston, Calvin had learned to read the frequencies that other people missed. "I need to keep this brief. I'm standing in the booking area of the Hargrove Heights Police Department in Washington State." 3 seconds of silence. "Sir?" Calvin's voice went very carefully neutral. "Are you visiting the precinct?" "I am not visiting Calvin. I am under arrest." The sound that came through the line was a chair being pushed back from a desk. Hard. Followed by the rapid quiet sound of a man switching into a completely different operational mode. What charges? Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, failure to comply. The arresting officer is Dale Croft. The dash cam in his cruiser was active and recording during the entire stop and arrest. I need that footage flagged and secured before this department's IT staff gets near it. Director, I can have you out of there in 20 minutes. Negative. Quiet. Final. Do not extract me yet. Extract me. Listen carefully. Calvin listened. If I walk out now, Croft gets a paid suspension and he's back on these streets in 3 weeks. The footage disappears into a server error, and whatever has been happening in this department, and something has been happening. Calvin, I could feel it in the way that officer moved, the way the desk sergeant looked at him. The whole atmosphere of a place where the wrong things have been running without consequence for a long time, it keeps running. Quietly. Doing to the people of this town who don't have my credentials what it just tried to do to me. Calvin said nothing. He was understanding exactly what was being asked of him. I want an emergency digital audit on this department. 5 years of records. Don't go through local judicial channels. I want this clean of any local influence. Push what you find to my encrypted device as soon as it's available. A pause. Get Diana Reeves on the phone. Seattle field office. Tell her Code Alpha full rapid deployment team. Nobody breaches until I give the signal. The keyboard on Calvin's end was already moving. Understood, Director. A beat. Diana is going to be... She's going to have things to say. Let her say them when she gets here. Tell her I want the booking formally completed before her team comes in. Every step, on paper. Yes, sir. Calvin's voice dropped the professional register for just a moment. Just enough to let 11 years of working beside someone come through. Are you all right, sir? Marcus looked at his wrists, the red marks where the cuffs had bitten. I'm fine, Calvin. Get it done. He hung up, turned back to face the room, same expression he'd worn at the window of the rental car. Dale Croft across the room had been watching him the whole time. He caught Marcus's eye and gave him the smirk of a man who has just watched someone make a desperate phone call and is already imagining the voicemail they left on a public defender's answering machine. Marcus walked back to the booking counter. I'm ready to complete the booking process, he said to Briggs. Pleasant. Unhurried. The pleasantness of a man who can afford to be pleasant. Dale opened his mouth to say something sharp. Marcus was already at the counter. In the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C., Calvin Morse was already making the second call. Briggs told Marcus to empty his pockets. Marcus reached into his pants pockets first. Every movement announced. Every item placed deliberately on the booking log. The rental car keys, a pack of spearmint gum, a thin silver money clip with a modest fold of cash, loose change, small, unimportant things, placed in the specific order of a man building toward something. Everything, Dale said. He had the posture of a man watching something he owns being processed. Jacket pockets, too. Inner pockets. Everything. Marcus paused. 2 seconds. No more. But the pause had a quality, a slight shift in the atmosphere of the moment, like the stillness before a large piece of furniture is moved and everyone in the booking room felt it without being able to say why. Ryan Malone looked up from his notebook. Marcus looked at Dale, then at Briggs. Then slowly he looked at Ryan, and Ryan met his eyes and held them. And what passed between them was not a threat and was not a performance. It was information. And Ryan received it without knowing exactly what he was receiving. Marcus reached into the inner breast pocket of the navy hoodie. Hey. Dale's hand dropped to his weapon. Hands where I can. Marcus withdrew his hand. Slowly. Completely. He was not holding a weapon. He was holding a heavy black leather bifold, the size and weight of a small hardcover book. The kind of object whose density communicates authority before you have even opened it, built to be exactly what it was and nothing else. He placed it on the booking log with one deliberate motion. It landed with a sound. A dense, definitive, flat thud, the sound of something important arriving. The sound of a door slamming shut on the world as Dale Croft had known it. The leather fell open on impact. Under the harsh institutional fluorescence of the Hargrove Heights Police Department booking room, what caught the light and threw it back at the room was gold. Solid. Heavy. Embossed. The federal eagle of the Bureau of Investigation. Wings spread, unwavering, staring up at the room with the calm permanence of something that has been here before, and will be here long after everyone in this room is gone. Below the eagle in the embossed gold lettering of the Department of Justice Deputy Director, National Security Branch. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Ryan Malone found it first. His eyes hit the badge. Read the title once. Read it again. His mouth moved without sound. His left hand reached out blindly and found the edge of the filing cabinet and held it. His knees had made a decision without consulting him. Lou Briggs was next. He leaned forward. His reading glasses were already on, but they were no longer enough. He pulled them off his face, entirely bent over the counter, until his nose was inches from the badge, and read the embossed lettering with the desperate concentration of a man praying his vision has failed him for the first time in 58 years. It hadn't. The scanner dropped from his hand and hit the linoleum floor, and the clatter of it was the loudest sound in the room. Dale Croft was last. His brain wired for 14 years to process the world in the binary of dominance and submission of belonging and not belonging, of the kind of people who get stopped on Bellwood Avenue, and the kind who do the stopping received the information from his eyes and simply would not move. 3 full seconds. His mouth was slightly open. The smirk had started to form and then stopped frozen halfway, grotesque. His face was rearranging itself through several stages, and none of them were things he had a name for. "What?" he said. "What is that fake? That's a fake. Look at him. You think the deputy director of the FBI is driving a rented Ford and drinking coffee on Bellwood? That's a prop. I'm tagging him for impersonating a federal officer." "Sergeant Briggs," Marcus said, and his voice was the voice he used in Senate hearings and presidential briefings. The voice that had been built for rooms far larger than this one, but that filled this room completely. "There is a QR code on the reverse of the identification card. Please scan it with your department terminal. It links directly to the DOJ verified personnel database. Do it now." Briggs picked up the scanner from the floor. His hands were trembling. He swept the red laser across the back of Marcus's credential card. The terminal made a sound it had never made before, a short high tone, a system bypassing its local database, connecting to something much further away and much more serious. A photograph of Marcus Weston filled the monitor. Below it, in bold, pulsing green text, clearance, top secret /SCI, active. Title Deputy Director, National Security Branch, FBI. Flag immediate. OIG notification triggered upon detention. The OIG notification flag. The moment Marcus had been formally detained, which was the moment Dale put him in the cruiser, an automated alert had already been sent to the office of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. The machine had already started moving, without anyone in this room touching it. Lou Briggs turned and looked at Dale Croft, and the expression on his face was something Ryan Malone would think about for years. Because it was not anger. It was not fear. It was the expression of a man seeing another man, clearly, fully, completely, without the buffer of 11 years of practiced blindness between them for the first time. "Brad," Briggs whispered, and his voice had lost every register of authority it had ever carried. It was just a man's voice now, small and horrified. "Brad, what have you done?" Ryan Malone sat down on the floor next to the filing cabinet. Not dramatically, not in a faint. His legs simply completed a decision his body had made without him. He put his notebook in his lap. He stared at his own handwriting. He thought about the word accessory and what it meant when the victim had a federal clearance and the crime was already logged in the OIG system. Then he started writing. Very fast, very precisely. The truth from the beginning, as fast as his hand could move. Dale's defenses arrived in rapid succession, each one hitting the wall of reality and crumbling. He should have flashed the badge at the window. Marcus said it quietly, clearly, with the patient specificity of someone reading from a law he had helped write. No federal officer is required to identify themselves to avoid an unlawful arrest by a local municipal officer who had no probable cause for the stop. The union will protect me federal charges, different jurisdiction, different scale. Pruitt will fix it. Dale looked at the door to the chief's office and understood in the specific terrible way that a bully understands when his protection has evaporated that the man behind that door was already composing his own defense. The office door opened. Chief Warren Pruitt stepped out in the rumpled, slightly irritated bearing of a man interrupted from something comfortable. He looked at the room, at Briggs behind the counter, at Ryan on the floor, at the strange wallet open on the booking log, at the terminal screen with its pulsing green federal text. His political instincts, which were considerable, fired a warning signal so loud it overrode everything else in his nervous system. He walked to the terminal, read the screen, looked at the man in the navy hoodie standing at his booking counter with complete unruffled composure, his jaw separated from its upper counterpart. "Director Weston, sir, this is a catastrophic misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible lapse by a subordinate. Please, let me get you a coffee. Come into my office. We are wiping this from the record entirely. You are free to go. Right now. Immediately." He reached out to guide Marcus by the arm, the practiced gesture of a political man trying to move a difficult conversation to a private location. Marcus looked down at the hand until Pruitt withdrew it. "I'm not going anywhere, Chief Pruitt," Marcus said, and the drop in his voice's register was so slight and so complete that the nearest desk officer actually leaned backward in his chair. "I've been formally detained, physically assaulted, transported against my will under threat of deadly force, and Officer Croft has publicly filed a false report in the presence of 4 witnesses, 2 of whom are his own department colleagues, and 1 of whom is currently sitting on your floor writing every word of it. Sir, please." Pruitt's voice had taken on the specific high frequency of a man watching something irreplaceable break. "If we can handle this between agencies without, we are well past professional courtesy, Chief." Marcus did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. If I walk out that door, you suspend Croft for a week with pay. The dash cam footage develops a server error, and this department goes back to doing what it has been doing to the people of this town who don't have federal credentials to protect them. No." He pointed without looking toward the holding pen. "I want the booking process completed. I want Officer Croft's fabricated narrative entered in writing under penalty of perjury. And then I am going to sit on that bench." "Wait for what?" Dale said, and his voice was just a voice now. The performance was gone. Completely. What was left was a frightened man asking a question he already knew the answer to. Marcus checked his watch. Plain analog. No nonsense. "For the United States government," he said. The wooden bench inside the holding pen was designed with no concessions to human comfort, deliberately, on principle. Marcus sat on it with the straight-backed posture of a man sitting at his own desk in Washington. Through the steel grate, he could see the entire booking floor. Briggs behind his counter staring at the booking log with the expression of a man reading his own indictment. The 2 desk officers who had stopped typing an hour ago and had not resumed. Dale Croft pacing the far edge of the room with the repetitive, purposeless motion of an animal that has discovered the edges of its enclosure. and Ryan Malone still on the floor by the filing cabinet, writing with a focused urgency that looked from this distance like a man trying to outrun a version of events that will otherwise become permanent. Marcus rotated his wrists slowly, examining the marks the cuffs had left. Deep red channels in the skin, the kind of bruising that would darken over the next 12 hours into something documented. The kind that a federal forensics team photographs as standard procedure. He had a memory he didn't often permit himself to visit. Baltimore, 1987, 17 years old. Walking home from the library on a Friday evening with 3 books in a backpack and the specific uncomplicated pleasure of a teenager who has just found what he wants to do with his life. The cop who stopped him that evening was not a bad man in any cartoon sense. He was a tired man in a system that told him certain bodies in certain neighborhoods required monitoring. He had spread Marcus across the hood of a patrol car on a Friday evening, and Marcus's library books had scattered across the wet street beneath him. And in that moment, face against cold metal at 17, Marcus had made a decision. Not about revenge, not about anger, though both were present. About what he was going to do with his life, and why. That decision had been every subsequent year of his career. On his encrypted tablet, Calvin's team had pushed the first audit findings to his device. While he sat on the bench, the preliminary data had begun arriving in clean, organized packets. 5 years of departmental records, use of force reports, complaint logs, internal communications, traffic stop data organized by neighborhood and by the demographic indicators of the people stopped in each of those neighborhoods. What he was reading was worse than he had expected. Marcus Weston did not often encounter things that were worse than he expected. He read it with the same flat, methodical attention he brought to every intelligence briefing, and he built in his mind a picture that was not about Dale Croft. Dale Croft was one thread, one symptom in a body that had been sick for a long time. Pulling one thread does not fix the garment. It just creates a different kind of damage. The picture he was building was about the structure, about the decisions made one level above Dale. The level that had created the conditions in which a Dale Croft could operate for 14 years without consequence and call it instinct. He looked up through the grate at Warren Pruitt, who was standing at the bars with a release form and the expression of a man making his final negotiating offer to someone who has already signed the contract with someone else. Marcus looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then he looked back at his tablet and added Warren Pruitt's name to the list. The service weapon was gone. The badge was gone. Pruitt had confiscated both in a panicked attempt to demonstrate decisive action before anyone asked him why he hadn't taken it years earlier, and without their weight, Dale Croft felt like a house with all the load-bearing walls removed. Technically still standing, but for reasons that were becoming less clear by the minute. He was pacing the perimeter of the booking room, and the perimeter was not a large space, which meant he was covering it in tight loops, and the tightness of the loops was itself a document of his deteriorating state. The first defense ran hard. He should have identified himself at the window. A federal agent has an obligation to produce credentials when stopped by law enforcement. This was entrapment. Dale was the victim here. This one lasted about 4 minutes before it hit the wall of the law. Marcus had stated it clearly no such obligation existed. The unlawful arrest was Dale's operational choice from the first moment he unsnapped the retention strap. The word unlawful was a problem that nothing could fully contain. The second defense, the union. Dale had in his mind always operated under the union's protective umbrella. The machinery of appeals and arbitration and colleague testimony that had been sufficient for every complaint, every use of force review. But the machinery worked on local scales, local timelines, local relationships. Federal charges existed on a completely different plane. The third defense, Pruitt. Dale only needed to look at Pruitt, standing at the bars of the holding pen, apologizing to the man he'd arrested, to understand that whatever arrangement had existed between them, the mutually beneficial exchange of protection that had run quietly for years, was over, was being dismantled right now by the man who had been one of its two signatories. Dale stopped pacing. He looked at his hands. They had been steady this morning at the window, steady when he reached for the door, steady when the cuffs went on. He stared at them now, and they were doing the thing that hands do when the body understands something the mind has not yet accepted. They were trembling. He stared at them like they belonged to someone else. He thought about his daughter, 9 years old. Thought her dad was a hero. There was a drawing on his refrigerator stick figures his daughter and himself labeled Daddy the Cop and Me. The daddy figure was twice the size and was wearing a shape she had labeled a medal. It was the Officer of the Month plaque that had sat on his counter since he was 29. The thought arrived and produced something real, something that could not be performed or rationalized. 6 seconds of genuine, unguarded grief. Then the rationalizations came rushing back to fill the space. Except they didn't fully close over it this time. Because the part of Dale that the rationalizations were designed to protect him from the part that had always known at some cellular level what it was actually doing and why that part was still there, was still speaking. In the specific quiet voice that shame uses when every other voice has finally gone silent. He hadn't stopped Marcus Weston because Marcus had broken a law. He had stopped Marcus because Marcus was black and parked in the wrong neighborhood, and a man in a blue shirt with a plaque on his counter had decided 14 years ago that this would always be enough. The defenses ran out. What remained was just the truth. Sitting in the middle of the room like something that had always been there patient, waiting for the day when there was nothing left to put in front of it. Dale pressed his back against the far wall and looked at the man sitting on the bench in the holding pen, sitting with the same composure he had had at the window on Bellwood Avenue, composure that had never once through any of it broken. And he understood for the first time and catastrophically late that the man had been in control of this situation from the moment the blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. The only person who had never been in control was the person who believed he was running it. The vibration arrived in the soles of Dale's shoes before the sound did. Ryan Malone had stopped thinking about what was going to happen to him somewhere around the 14th minute. Not because the question had been resolved, but because the more urgent question, the question of what kind of person he was going to be, had taken up all the available space. And the two questions he had realized with a clarity that felt physical, like something he could put his hand on, were actually the same question. The notebook was standard departmental issue. Dark blue cover, narrow-ruled pages. He had been using it for field notes since his first day with Dale. 3 months of shorthand observations. The pages he was writing on now were different from the others. He could feel it. He started from the beginning. 7:43 a.m. Bellwood Avenue. Cruiser 7 north end of the block. Subject vehicle, dark green rental sedan, legally parked, 2-hour zone, engine off. He wrote the plate number from memory. Single occupant, black male, early 50s, navy hoodie, coffee cup, tablet, no observable suspicious behavior, no movement consistent with surveillance or criminal activity. He wrote it exactly as he had seen it, not as Dale had described it, not as the booking report would record it, as he had actually seen it. From the passenger seat of Cruiser 7 at 7:43 in the morning, when the whole thing was still a decision that hadn't been made yet. His mother's voice was in the room with him, not as a sound, as a quality. The specific way she delivered important things in a very quiet, very plain voice, as if the importance was obvious enough that it didn't need performance. She had said this to him the week before he started at the academy, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee between them, looking at him with the measuring look that 20 years of public defense work had built. The badge doesn't protect you from doing the wrong thing. It protects everyone else from you doing the wrong thing. You understand the difference. He had nodded and said yes, and had believed he understood. He understood it differently now. He wrote the fabricated burglary narrative, put the word fabricated next to it, underlined it twice, did not erase it. He wrote the order to exit the vehicle, wrote the legal basis provided none and the legal basis required from memory from the constitutional law section of the academy curriculum that had felt entirely clear in the abstract, and that felt applied to the last 90 minutes of his life. Like a set of lines he had watched someone cross in real time while he stood on the other side and said nothing. He wrote the pat-down. He wrote the cuffs. He wrote that the subject had offered zero physical resistance at any point during the stop, the removal from the vehicle, the pat-down, or the arrest. He wrote that the restraints had been applied visibly tighter than standard protocol required. He wrote Dale's booking narrative and labeled it in letters larger than everything else on the page does not match witnessed events. He looked up through the grate at Marcus Weston. Marcus was reading his tablet with the same composure he had brought to every moment of the past 90 minutes. And Marcus looked up at the same moment not because he had heard anything, but because Marcus noticed things had been noticing things continuously from the beginning, and their eyes met. Ryan held the gaze. Something passed between them that was not spoken and did not need to be. Ryan looked back at his notebook. He tore out the pages he had written, stood up from the floor, walked to Briggs's desk and placed the pages on the booking log next to the open federal wallet. "It's all here," he said. His voice was trying to be steady and mostly succeeding. "Everything I witnessed from the beginning, time-stamped, all of it accurate." Briggs looked at the pages, looked at Ryan, looked at Marcus through the bars of the holding pen. He did not push the pages away. Warren Pruitt was not a stupid man. This was the most important thing to understand about him. Stupid men make mistakes from ignorance, and the mistakes of ignorant men are comprehensible. They didn't know better, they couldn't see what they couldn't see. But Warren Pruitt had seen clearly, and chosen anyway, which was a different category of wrong. And it was the category Marcus Weston was most interested in. Pruitt had been chief for 9 years. In those 9 years, he had built a department that produced numbers his mayor found satisfying, managed a budget his city council found efficient, maintained a public posture that the wealthier residents found reassuring. And none of those things had required him to look directly at what the numbers were made of, because looking directly would have required him to act on what he saw, and acting would have cost him the mayor's goodwill and the city council's approval, and the sense of quiet, comfortable authority that 9 years without serious challenge had given him. He had known about Dale Croft for 6 of those 9 years, had reviewed 14 excessive force complaints, had read the pattern in them as clearly as anyone who chose to read it could, had filed each one under administrative review pending, and left them there to age. Because the alternative was confronting the union, losing 2 months in arbitration, and watching Dale's arrest numbers, which were good numbers that made the quarterly reports sing drop while Dale sat on suspension. The math of institutional convenience had come down every single time on the side of inaction. He had not told Dale to racially profile, had not written a memo endorsing it. He had simply looked at what Dale was doing and looked at the numbers it produced and not drawn the line between them in any visible place. And that was all it had taken. The machine needed no further instruction. It ran on silence. Now he stood at the bars of the holding pen with the release form in his hand and the political calculation visible in his eyes, and Marcus could read it as clearly as he read a briefing making his final attempt to find a version of the next hour that he survived intact. The pitch was practiced, layered. He framed the morning as the isolated failure of a rogue officer, framed himself as a man who would guarantee swift accountability, framed the resolution he was proposing as the mature professional interagency management of a situation that had gotten out of hand due to one person's actions rather than any structural failure of the department. He delivered it with the smooth, persuasive confidence of a man who had spent 9 years saying difficult things in rooms where the audience wanted to believe him. Marcus let him finish. then said quietly, "Chief Pruitt, if I walk out that door right now, Officer Croft receives a paid suspension. The dash cam footage is logged to a server that develops a technical failure in the next 48 hours. The excessive force complaints sitting in your internal system for the past 6 years are sealed under the administrative review designation your sergeant used to prevent them from reaching the union board. And this department goes back to doing what it has been doing, running targeted stops in minority demographics, entering Hargrove Heights under the cover of discretionary patrol, and it continues doing it to people who do not have a federal credential to protect them." He looked at Pruitt steadily. "You had the power to stop this years ago. You had the authority, the information, and the institutional standing to look at what was happening in your department and say no more. You chose not to. You chose the numbers that kept the mayor happy and your position comfortable. And the people of this town paid the price for your comfort in the ways that people pay when the system is supposed to protect them, but has decided they're too small a constituency to bother with." He looked at the release form in Pruitt's hand. "Put that away, Chief. I'm not signing it." Pruitt took a step back from the bars. The last of the political mask went with it. What remained underneath was something more honest than Warren Pruitt had allowed himself to be in a very long time. Just a frightened man who understood that the bill he had been running up for 9 years had just been called due. He opened his mouth to say something, and then the floorboards vibrated beneath their feet, and everything else was over. It arrived in the soles of their shoes before anyone processed it as sound. A deep sub-bass resonance, the kind of frequency that bypasses the auditory system entirely and goes straight to the chest cavity, the kind the body registers as large and close before the conscious mind has assembled the explanation. And the effect it produced in the booking room was total. Every voice gone quiet, every motion stopped the building, drawing a breath and holding it. Lou Briggs stood up from his chair. He looked over the counter toward the glass front doors, stopped breathing. The sky outside, which had been the pale blue of a Pacific Northwest morning, was dark, not from cloud cover, from the matte, light-absorbing blackness of 4 Chevrolet Suburbans that had arrived at the front of the precinct with the coordinated silent precision of vehicles built specifically for this kind of operation. Never once in their operational lives described as subtle. They sat in a tight tactical V formation that blocked the front entrance, the adjacent parking, and 3 of the department's patrol cars. Not by accident, by geometric precision, the work of drivers who had rehearsed this formation and executed it in 11 seconds flat. No roof lights, no standard markings. Only small recessed strobes embedded in the grills and along the windshield frames, pulsing red and blue with a quiet, absolute authority that made the light bar on a Hargrove Heights patrol car look like a toy. A 5th vehicle appeared around the side of the building in the same moment, a mobile command truck. It crossed the rear exit of the precinct and stopped there with the finality of a deadbolt turning. There was no avenue of departure. One desk officer, instincts faster than judgment, reached for his sidearm. A federal agent was already inside the glass before anyone processed that the door had opened. 4 steps to the desk officer, a hand on his wrist. No force, no words, just the absolute communicative pressure of a hand belonging to someone very good at their job delivering a very simple message. The desk officer put both hands flat on the desk, did not reach for anything again. Dale Croft at the far wall looked through the glass at the black hoods of the Suburbans. He made a sound that was not a word. Then he pressed himself harder against the wall as if the wall might absorb him into itself if the circumstances became sufficiently desperate. The breaching ram hit the front doors with the sound of glass giving up rather than shattering. One enormous crack. Then the cascading music of safety glass falling inward in 1,000 small pieces, catching the morning light coming through the destroyed frame and scattering it across the booking room floor like a field of broken diamonds. The sound traveled through every floor of the building and returned as an echo more felt than heard. S.A.C. Diana Reeves stepped through the opening, not running, walking, the measured pace of a person who is exactly where she intended to be, and who is in no hurry because the situation is already resolved. She was 46 years old, natural hair pulled back in a smooth coil at the base of her neck. The kind of lean, controlled build that comes from treating fitness as a professional tool rather than a personal indulgence. Her jaw could have been the work of a sculptor with strong opinions about structural integrity, but it was her eyes. Every agent under her command described them differently, but they all agreed on the same thing. They gave you the immediate, complete impression that she had already seen everything you were about to say, that she had seen it, considered it, and moved past it before you opened your mouth. She had walked into rooms far more dangerous than this one. Behind her, 22 agents in dark tactical gear moved through the opening in a precise pattern that covered the room's exits, its blind corners, its desk clusters, and filing alcoves. The specific rehearsed choreography of a team that has done this before and understands the geometry of a room as a tactical problem to be solved before it becomes anything else. Reeves did not acknowledge Pruitt's outstretched hand, did not acknowledge Briggs stepping back from the counter, did not look at Dale Croft. She walked across the booking room directly to the holding pen. She looked at Marcus Weston sitting on the bench behind the steel grate, sitting straight, reading his tablet, in a locked holding cell of a municipal police department that he could have avoided entirely with 4 seconds at the window. One muscle moved in Diana Reeves's jaw. A single, brief, involuntary contraction. The full extent of what she allowed the room to see of what she was feeling, which was a fury that burned cold rather than hot, the kind more dangerous precisely because it was controlled. "Director," she said. "Agent Reeves." Marcus stood, straightened his sleeve. "Excellent response time, as always." "Are you injured?" "Bruised wrists. Nothing requiring immediate medical attention." He looked at her with the direct, unvarnished communication of two people who have worked beside each other long enough to be honest at speed. "I want the booking formally completed before we proceed, every step, on paper." Reeves held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, taking in the cuff marks on his wrists, the red line on his jaw from the car door, the general information of what the last 2 hours had looked like on a man's body. She nodded, the nod of someone who has understood and is done discussing it. She turned to face Warren Pruitt. Pruitt was standing 6 feet behind her with his hand still partially extended. The expression on his face had traveled through several stages in the last 30 seconds and had arrived at the look of a man who has just accurately calculated the total of what he owes and found the sum exceeds every available resource he possesses. "Chief Pruitt." Her voice was the voice of a person who has decided every word she uses will do exactly the work assigned to it. No more, no less. "I am Special Agent in Charge, Diana Reeves, FBI Seattle Field Office. I am executing federal warrants signed by Judge Patricia Okafor of the Western District of Washington 42 minutes ago. Those warrants authorize the seizure of all digital servers, all physical and digital case files, all dash cam archives, all personnel records, and all financial records pertaining to the operation of this department. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is on a flight from Washington, D.C., and will arrive this evening. This building is now under federal jurisdiction." She paused. "Please open the holding cell." Pruitt reached for his keys. His hands were not cooperating. Lou Briggs. Old Lou Briggs, who had taken Ryan's notebook pages and not pushed them away, walked around the counter with his master keys, unlocked the holding pen gate, pulled it open, stepped back. Marcus walked out. He did not stretch, did not look relieved. Straightened his sleeve, tucked his tablet under his arm, and looked exactly as he had looked sitting in his rental car on Bellwood Avenue, a man in a gray hoodie who had somewhere to be and a cup of coffee to finish. "Ready to proceed?" Reeves asked, quiet. "Let's go talk to Officer Croft," Marcus said. The agents who had been flanking Dale Croft stepped back as Marcus crossed the room. Because the room understood without being told that this part was not tactical. It was human, and it required the specific irreducible weight of two people in the same space without the buffer of institutional procedure between them. Dale was against the wall. Badge gone, weapon gone, performance of authority gone. Just a broad-shouldered man in a blue shirt that fit too tightly across the shoulders, with eyes that had in the last 40 minutes lost the quality of certainty that had been their defining feature for 14 years. What had replaced it was raw, more honest. Fear. The specific naked, unperformable fear of a man who has run out of room. Marcus stopped 2 feet away. He looked at Dale the way a diagnostician looks at a patient whose chart he has already read. Not unkindly, but without the softening that kindness would require. With the flat, complete attention of someone seeing the whole picture and finding it coherent and devastating and extending far beyond the immediate person in front of him. When Marcus spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only Dale and the nearest agents could fully hear him. And it was not the voice of triumph. It had none of the qualities of satisfaction that Dale might have expected from a man who has watched the instrument of his own humiliation become the instrument of someone else's destruction. It was the voice of a verdict. "You saw me on Bellwood Avenue this morning," Marcus said, "and you made a decision. Not because of anything I was doing, because of what I looked like, and where I was sitting. And because in 14 years this town has never made you explain the difference between those two things and an actual reason." He held Dale's gaze. "You have been calling that instinct for so long you can't hear the word for what it actually is." Dale's mouth moved. No sound came out. "I am not the first person you made that decision about. I am not the 100th. Every man in Hargrove Heights who got pulled over on the way to work. Every woman questioned in a parking lot. Every family that drove through this neighborhood and found themselves on the side of the road with your hands on their car, they are the ones who paid the price for what you call instinct. They paid it without a federal credential in their pocket. They paid it over and over, and the machine took their payments and ran, and nobody stopped it, and nobody stopped you." The room was entirely quiet. Not a keyboard, not a radio, not a breath that anyone chose to take out loud. "True authority," Marcus said, and now the voice carried something real beneath the precision. A slight controlled weight that came from somewhere older than this room, older than this morning, older than this particular Dale Croft in this particular town. True authority is knowing you have the power to destroy someone and choosing restraint, choosing to look first, listen first, extend the assumption of humanity first. You had that choice 14 years ago. You had it this morning. You had it at the window before you turned the lights on. He looked at Dale without blinking. You made the same choice every single time. And this is where that choice arrives. He turned to Reeves. "Execute the arrest warrant." Diana Reeves stepped forward, federal restraints in hand heavier than local cuffs built for transport rather than theater. She read the charges in the level final voice of a machine completing a function it was designed for. "Dale Croft, you are under arrest for violation of Title 18. United States Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Additionally charged with aggravated assault under federal jurisdiction, kidnapping of a federal officer, and falsifying official government records." She paused one beat. "You have the right to remain silent." Dale's knees went. Not dramatically, not a collapse. A slow, progressive, structural failure, the knees bending outward and inward simultaneously, and the two agents stepped forward and held him up by the arms. The sound that came out of him was the sound of a man weeping quietly, and it was ugly and real and entirely unperformed. "Please." His voice was barely there. I have a family. I didn't know who he was. It was a mistake. Please. Marcus had already turned away. That is exactly the point, he said, over his shoulder, quiet. And the room received it in the specific silence of people who know they are hearing the sentence the entire story has been building toward. If I were a carpenter, a teacher, a man who drives a bus, I would be in that holding cell right now, with bruised wrists and a fabricated record with my name on it, and you would be in the locker room at the end of your shift telling the story of how you handled a situation. He looked at the agents holding Dale's arms. Put him in the car. They walked Dale Croft across the booking floor. His boots dragged on the linoleum. The sound of the dragging was the sound of a man who has run out of everything, out of defenses, out of performance, out of the specific, terrible energy that had been propelling him for 14 years. They walked him through the shattered frame, out into the morning. The door of the rear Suburban closed, and the morning continued indifferent as if it always would. Every Hargrove Heights officer remaining in the booking room was standing still. Nobody moved. Nobody had a single thing to say. Marcus turned from the shattered doors. Warren Pruitt was standing in the center of the booking room with the expression of a man who has been composing a speech for 20 minutes and has just realized the audience has changed and the speech no longer applies. Marcus walked toward him. The room made space. "Do you really believe," Marcus said before Pruitt could begin, "that I authorized 50 federal agents and a mobile command unit for one patrol officer with a bad track record?" Pruitt said nothing, because saying the answer out loud was something his body had not yet agreed to do. "You don't bring a structural engineering team to fix one cracked tile," Marcus said. "You bring it when the foundation is gone." He stopped in front of Pruitt. "While I was sitting on your wooden bench, my team in Washington was running an emergency digital audit of this department's records. 5 years. I read what they sent me." He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. 16 excessive force complaints against Dale Croft. All of them marked administrative review pending in your internal system. None of them reaching the Union Review Board. All of them carrying your electronic signature in the status field. Pruitt's upper lip had found a new level of moisture. Targeted traffic stop benchmarks, not written as quotas because you were careful about that, but as community engagement metrics in 3 specific patrol sectors that correspond exactly to the 3 entry corridors that minority residents use when coming into Hargrove Heights from adjacent neighborhoods. The officers who met those benchmarks received favorable performance reviews. The ones who didn't received remediation conversations. It's in your email archives. Those benchmarks were not intended to 23 documented dashcam failures in the past 14 months. Marcus continued, even steady, implacable. All during high-contact stops. All in vehicles operated by officers named in multiple excessive force complaints. All logged as equipment malfunctions by the same IT staff member who reported to the same captain who reported to you. Pruitt hit the booking counter with his back. And civil asset forfeiture funds collected disproportionately from stops in those same 3 corridors flowing into a departmental community outreach budget that was used, among other things, to fund a 4-day department retreat at a resort in Bend, Oregon. You hacked I authorized a federal emergency audit, Marcus said, using provisions that exist specifically for situations where local judicial channels cannot be trusted to remain independent of the institution under investigation, which this one qualified for because 3 of the judges who handle civil matters in this jurisdiction appear repeatedly in your personal calendar on alternating Sunday mornings, on a golf course. He looked at Pruitt with the full, unobstructed attention of a man who has read the complete file and found it coherent from beginning to end. Dale Croft was the face of what was happening here. You are the structure that allowed the face to keep showing up. You are not a stupid man, Chief Pruitt, which is precisely why this is so much worse than if you were. Diana Reeves stepped to Pruitt's left. An agent stepped to his right. "Warren Pruitt," Reeves said in the same level final voice. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights, misappropriation of public funds, and official corruption. Hands behind your back, please." Pruitt's last political instinct to perform cooperativeness, to lean into the arrest as if it were a choice rather than a compulsion, activated. He put his hands behind his back before the agents reached for them. Old habit. Managing the optics of a moment he had lost complete control of. The restraints went on with the bureaucratic efficiency of something that has happened 10,000 times before and will happen 10,000 times again. The remaining Hargrove Heights officers watched their chief of police being walked toward the shattered front doors. The man who had ruled this town's law enforcement for 9 years. The man who had looked at the complaints and looked at the numbers and made the calculation over and over that silence was easier than accountability. Nobody moved. The morning light came in through the shattered frame and hit the broken glass on the floor and made it look for a moment like something other than wreckage. The booking room was reorganizing itself around work that needed to be done. Agents moving through filing cabinets, Ethernet cables being run to the command truck. The specific competent machinery of a federal evidence operation converting a police department into a crime scene. Marcus moved through it toward the spot where Ryan Malone was now sitting in a chair, not on the floor, the notebook still in his lap. Not writing anymore. Just sitting with it the way you sit with something you've finished and aren't quite ready to put down. Ryan watched him come and did not look away, because looking away would have been a kind of dishonesty he was done with. Marcus pulled a chair from a nearby desk and sat across from him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The sounds of the federal operation moved around them like weather. "When did you know?" Marcus asked. No preamble. No gentleness that would have been a form of condescension. Ryan's answer came without pause, because it had been sitting in him for the past 2 hours, fully formed, waiting for someone to ask the right question. At the window, before he turned the lights on. "I knew what he was going to do when he saw you. I knew there was no reason. I knew the burglary story was fabricated the second it came out of his mouth." He stopped, then quieter. "I didn't know who you were. And that's not the point, is it?" "No," Marcus said. "It isn't. I should have said something at the window." Ryan's voice was steady, but only barely. "I kept telling myself there would be a better moment, a cleaner moment, a moment where saying something wouldn't cost me everything. But there isn't a better moment. The window was the moment. That was all there ever was." "You wrote it down," Marcus said. "When I realized I wasn't going to stop it, yes?" Ryan looked at the notebook. "It's not enough." "No, it's not." Marcus said it without softening, because Ryan Malone had earned the unpadded version. "You had the legal authority and the physical ability to intervene at the window before anyone was in handcuffs, before a federal officer was sitting in a holding cell. You had 30 seconds of courage available to you, and you chose not to use them. And the only reason this story resolves the way it's going to resolve is that I was carrying tools most of the people Dale Croft has been doing this to for 14 years do not have. You understand what I'm saying?" Ryan nodded. The nod of someone who has been carrying this understanding for 2 hours and is now simply confirming it to another person. "You wrote the truth," Marcus said, and the tone shifted not to warmth exactly, but to the acknowledgement that truth-writing is not nothing even when it arrives late. "In a room where the truth was being actively replaced with something else, you wrote what you witnessed. That matters, not because it saves you from what this morning cost, but because it's the foundation of something. It's what you build from." Ryan looked at him directly. "Is there any version where I'm still in law enforcement after this?" Marcus considered it, with the full weight it deserved. "There is a version," he said, "where a person who spent 3 months watching something wrong happen and who finally did the one small, honest thing available to him, uses that experience as the beginning of something better than what he was part of. That version exists, but it cannot be built on another second of silence when you see something wrong. He stood, straightened his hoodie. Agent Reeves's team will take your full statement. Be completely honest about everything, especially the things that don't reflect well on you. He looked at Ryan one more time. That's how it starts. He walked away, and Ryan sat with the notebook in his lap and began for the second time that morning to write the truth. This time, without hesitating. The morning outside the Hargrove Heights Police Department was unchanged in all the ways that mattered to the rest of the town. The Douglas firs were still filtering the light in long columns. The boutiques on Bellwood Avenue were still open. The golden retriever was probably still walking its owner somewhere on these quiet, cedar-scented streets. Marcus stepped through the shattered frame of the front doors and stood for a moment on the broken glass, breathing the air. Wet cedar, espresso from somewhere down the block, the faint, clean edge of something moving in from the coast. Just air. The Suburbans sat idling in their tactical V. Two agents at the command truck gave him the small professional nod of people who are glad to see him on the correct side of a locked door. In the back of the nearest Suburban, visible through the reinforced window, Dale Croft sat with his head down. The specific posture of a man who has run out of things to hold himself up with. Marcus walked past the vehicle. Dale looked up. For 3 seconds, they looked at each other through the glass. Marcus did not look away quickly, did not look away dramatically, did not perform anything. He looked at Dale the way you look at a problem that has been correctly solved with the flat, completed attention of a man who has nothing further to communicate about it. Then he turned away and did not look back. Diana Reeves fell into step beside him as he walked toward the edge of the lot. They moved in the companionable quiet of two people who have worked beside each other long enough to not need to fill every silence. DOJ lands at 3. She said. Tell them the forfeiture records and the benchmark memos are the priority. The pattern of conduct over time is the case Croft's arrest is the entry point, not the conclusion. I want the IT department's records going back to the first dash cam failure. We'll have it. A few steps of quiet. You could have ended this at the window this morning, Reeves said, not an accusation, an observation offered into the space between them. 1 credential, 45 seconds. Yes. Why didn't you... Marcus looked at the building behind him, the shattered front doors, the black-clad agents moving visible through the glass, the filing cabinets being opened and the servers being disconnected and the whole interior structure of a decade of institutional failure being carefully, thoroughly documented. I've been behind that window before, he said, when I was 17 and had 3 library books in a backpack and nothing in my breast pocket except a heart beating too fast. And the man on the other side of that window suffered no consequence, and nobody audited the department he worked for, and the machine kept running. He looked at Reeves. I have the credential now. Most people don't, and every time someone like me shows it at the window and makes it stop before anyone can see what it was going to become, the machine stays running. This time I wanted it on paper. Reeves said nothing for a moment, then, understood. An agent approached with Marcus's tablet, his phone, the rental keys, and a paper cup of coffee from the boutique on Bellwood Avenue, black no sugar still warm. The order that Reeves had quietly dispatched someone for while her team was processing the building, because she had worked with Marcus Weston long enough to know he would want it and would not ask. Marcus took the cup, looked at it. Aaliyah's graduation is at 2. Go? Reeves said, and she meant it in every dimension those 2 letters could carry. Marcus walked to the dark green rental sedan. It sat exactly where he had left it, patient, nondescript, entirely unaffected by everything that had happened since he parked it. He got in, adjusted the seat, started the engine. He took the first sip, still warm. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. Behind him, the Suburbans sat. The shattered glass of the precinct's front doors caught the morning light and threw it back in pieces. Agents moved inside, methodical and thorough, taking apart the machine brick by brick. Marcus did not look in the rearview mirror. He had somewhere to be. The drive to Denise's house took 22 minutes. Marcus drove through streets that were beginning to fill with mid-morning traffic. Ordinary people going about an ordinary Tuesday that would look exactly the same to them as the Tuesday before it and the Tuesday after it. And outside the window, the boutiques gave way to coffee shops, and the coffee shops gave way to the slightly less manicured blocks where the houses were smaller and the trees were less professionally tended, and the yards had the specific lived-in quality of places where children actually played in them rather than photographed them. He called Denise when he was 10 minutes out. "Marcus Anthony Weston," she said, before he had finished saying hello in the voice that sisters develop for moments when they are glad someone is alive but are not yet ready to say so, because saying so would make the fear real in a way that the exasperation kept at bay. "Where have you been? I've called you 4 times. I got held up. Held up doing what, Marcus? You're on leave." "Some work came up. It's handled." The pause through the phone had the quality of a woman who knows her brother and knows when it's handled means something with weight in it, who is deciding in real time whether to pursue the truth now or accept the surface and be grateful he's on his way. "Are you all right?" she asked, and she asked it the way that people ask it when they're really asking something else. "I'm fine," Marcus said. 10 minutes. "Aaliyah has asked about you twice," Denise said, and the shift in her voice from worry to warmth was the shift of a mother moving to where her daughter currently needed her. "She's had the cap and gown on since 7 this morning. I told her the tassel goes on the left, but she's 18 now, and apparently that means she knows more than me." Marcus smiled. Small, real. He thought about their mother, sitting at the kitchen table in Baltimore in 1989 when Marcus told her he was going to apply to the FBI. She had looked at him with the specific, loving assessment of a woman who understood exactly what that road looked like and wanted to make sure her son understood it too. And she had said in the quiet, plain voice she used when something mattered, "You go in there, Marcus, and you hold that door open behind you. That's the whole job." He had spent 36 years holding doors. He pulled onto Denise's street, a quiet road with mature maples overhanging the pavement. Nothing like Bellwood Avenue, but clean and proud and full of the specific warmth of a home that has hosted decades of family. The front door opened before he had fully parked. Aaliyah came down the front walk at the pace of a young woman who is trying not to run and losing the battle, cap and gown over a yellow dress, the tassel exactly where she had decided it belonged, grinning with the complete unguarded joy of an 18-year-old on the day she has been pointing toward for 4 years. She saw the gray hoodie. She laughed, real and immediate and unperformed. "You actually wore it." Marcus got out of the car, and Aaliyah wrapped her arms around him with the complete unself-conscious certainty of someone who hasn't yet learned to hold part of herself back. And Marcus held her the way that a man holds the people he loves when he has recently been reminded with some specificity of exactly what the work is for. The people who get to go to their graduations without the weight, who are 18 and know everything, and have the tassel on the wrong side and a full academic scholarship waiting for them on the other side of this afternoon. "The tassel goes on the left," Marcus said into the top of her cap. "It goes wherever I say it goes," Aaliyah said into his shoulder. "I'm the graduate." Denise was at the door, watching them with the expression of a woman who has spent 18 years doing the demanding invisible work of raising a daughter to be this exact person on this exact morning. When Marcus looked up at her, she gave him the look that 30-something years of being siblings produces, the look that says, "I know there's a version of this morning you're not telling me, and I'm glad you're here, and we'll talk about it later all at once." He didn't tell Aaliyah what had happened on Bellwood Avenue that morning. He didn't need to. They went inside into the warm, coffee-scented house, and Marcus sat at the kitchen table and let the morning do what mornings are supposed to do. Continue. Move forward. Be warm. This, he thought, is what the work is for. 7 months later, the federal courtroom in Seattle was full. Dale Croft sat at the defense table in an orange federal jumpsuit with transport chains on his wrists. The tailored uniform was gone. The utility belt was gone. The swagger was so thoroughly gone that it was almost impossible to reconstruct it from the man sitting in the chair, smaller now in the way that people become smaller when the thing that has been inflating them for years finally and completely deflates, and what remains is just the actual person, the actual size, the actual weight, which was less than the performance had suggested. Judge Elaine Mbatha brought the gavel down after a 40-minute statement. 12 years federal penitentiary. No eligibility for early parole. 3 specific counts read into the record, including Section 242 of Title 18. When the gavel hit the wood, Dale's eyes closed. Did not reopen for a long moment. When they did, they had the quality of eyes that have finished arguing with a reality they can no longer dispute. Warren Pruitt was sentenced the following week. 8 years for conspiracy and corruption and obstruction. Stripped of his pension. His professional certifications revoked. He made a statement outside the courthouse attributing his conduct to a culture he had inherited and failed to adequately reform. The reporter covering the sentencing did not follow up with a question. There was nothing in the statement worth pursuing. The Hargrove Heights Police Department was formally dissolved 30 days after the sentencing. County Sheriff's Office absorbed its jurisdiction under a federal consent decree specifying quarterly civil rights audits for 5 years. The decree required a complete redesign of use of force policies, traffic stop documentation requirements, and the complaint review process conducted by a DOJ Civil Rights Division team that worked in the building for 8 weeks and produced a document nobody in the previous administration would have approved. Ryan Malone's testimony was described by the federal prosecutor as decisive and unambiguous. The precision of the notebook pages he had handed to Lou Briggs on the morning of the arrest had given the prosecution a contemporaneous civilian account of every event from the initial stop through the booking, corroborating the dashcam footage on every material point. He resigned from the force the day after Dale's sentencing. Enrolled in law school the following semester, civil rights litigation, constitutional law. His application essay was about his mother, who had spent 20 years as a public defender telling her son that a badge was a promise, and about the morning he had sat on the floor of a police booking room and written the truth in a notebook when it was the only honest thing he had available to do, and about what he had decided when he stood up and placed those pages on the counter in front of Lou Briggs. Lou Briggs retired 4 months after the dissolution. He cooperated fully with the federal investigation, provided without being asked documentation of every excessive force complaint he had processed in 11 years with annotations in his own handwriting. On his last day in the building, he found Ryan's notebook on his desk. A note. In case you ever need to remember what it felt like to do the right thing. Briggs took it home, put it on the shelf, did not talk about it to anyone, reread it twice. In Washington, D.C., in the secure office on the 4th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover Building, Marcus Weston read the final sentencing summary on a Tuesday morning in December. The window behind him looked out over Pennsylvania Avenue. The coffee on his desk was black, no sugar, still warm. He read it with the same flat, methodical attention he brought to every document. Set the tablet down. Did not smile. Did not celebrate, because this was not that kind of work. This was the kind that requires you to understand that finishing one thing is simply the moment when the next thing becomes visible. The next thing was already visible on the top of the stack. On the wall behind his desk, between the framed law degree and the Senate commendation, was a photograph in a plain, dark frame. Aaliyah, in her cap and gown, the tassel wherever she had decided it belonged. Laughing at something, just set her arm around a man in a gray hoodie who was smiling with the specific quality of a smile that knows exactly what it is for. Marcus picked up his coffee, pulled the next briefing toward him, got back to work. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Marcus's patience and Ryan's struggle in the ordinary courage it takes to do the right thing in the moment when everything is pushing you toward silence, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like this one matter because the questions they ask are real. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next one. And thank you genuinely for watching.